Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, the Arizona legislative session is underway. We've heard the governor's State of the State address. Tonight, we hear from the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. That's next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. The Arizona legislative session began earlier this week at the state capitol. Each month, we here at Arizona Horizon invite legislative leadership to join us for a discussion on the issues facing lawmakers. Tonight, we welcome Senate President Andy Biggs and Speaker of the House, David Gowan. Good to have you both here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me,
Hey,
Ted.
there's so much to talk about, but and I don't get to say breaking news much on this program, but I get to say a little bit of breaking news here. Late in the afternoon, judge comes out, says to both sides in the K through 12 inflation funding lawsuit, settle this thing, settle it now. What can you tell us about this?
Well, neither the Speaker nor I were there. We haven't had a full briefing yet, and so I think we really can't tell you much until we've seen the written minute entry or order of the court. And then once we've had a chance to digest it, then we might be able to make a comment. But I can't make a comment tonight.
Same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Until we see what's in front of us, we just found out, so we're still talking with counsel just as well.
In general, the governor, State of the State speech says, settle this lawsuit. Do you agree? Do you want a settlement of this lawsuit?
Well, Ted, that's part of this case too, and President Biggs and I have been discussing that at large. So we're still in those discussions, and at that point, we still have to go back and discuss it with our own members. So within that time frame, we'll figure that out.
In general terms, and not comfortable speaking on that?
Look, I mean, we could talk about what he said in the speech. I'm
Yes.
happy talking about that. We could talk about what's going on. But I think one of the most interesting dynamics of this is if you're not in the legislature, you might think that it's a monolithic body, but it is not. We're dealing with poor David here, the Speaker of the House. He's got more members in his caucus than I have in my entire body. And, you know, each one of those persons was elected by a constituency. They each have an opinion and an idea on what they should do on a whole host of issues. And so to say we need to do something immediately is just kind of naive when you consider the nature of the body.
In terms of the nature of the body, last question on this regarding budgeting around the order. Are there plan Bs, plan As, plan Cs? I mean, obviously there have to be contingencies.
Well, I think we always look at contingencies, not just this, but on any other potential problem we might have or revenue forecast we might look at. Yeah, we build a lot of those into budgets, but in this instance, we're waiting in large part for the governor's budget presentation this Friday. We're looking forward to that, and then we'll kind of work together with the governor's office.
What are you expecting from the governor's budget?
Well, I think we're going to look at it and see a balanced budget come forth, and I think it's going to be about what he's talked about in the State of the State, and that is grow the economy, grow ourselves out of this position we're in. One of the major things that we do when we're looking at the budget here, and from the House side, I know, is discussion on the deregulation side. And I think that helps our governor's vision here promote that growth, growing out of this. And if we can ask all our business owners out there, right here as I'm speaking to you, if you have troubles with regulation in some manner, shape, or form, discuss them with your local representative, or give us a call. Let us know what's harming you. Chances are, if it's harming you, it's harming somebody else. There's no silver bullet in deregulation. So you can't just say, "Here's a bill, it says dereg," and you've done it. You actually have to do it by piecemeal. So, in that view, we have to get our business owners to contact us. They have to come forth and let us know that, and we can actually attack those pieces to help them so that they can hire more people, help them to do better for this economy. When the economy is roaring and doing well, that means my family's doing good. And I look at that introvertly, you know.
Is that enough, though? We heard that from the governor as well. They'll let us know there's going to be a new regulatory, I think, council, something along, or at least put some teeth into what exists already. How much of a difference will that? It'll make a difference, I think. Some folks on both sides can agree to that. But really enough when there's hundreds of millions of dollars of shortfall out there?
I don't think that was his only stated solution. I think that he talked about, when he said a couple of things that caught my ear. He said everybody's going to have to tighten their belt, or some kind of general belt tightening. And he also talked about, he said a lot of people aren't going to necessarily be pleased with what he's going to do, but he feels that he has to make some tough decisions. So I think when you talk about general belt tightening and you talk about tough decisions, I would imagine that along with the idea of growing the economy to increase state revenues, I think you're going to be looking at trying to find efficiencies in government, which is something the governor mentioned, as well as maybe some reductions here or there, or even consolidations where you might need to consolidate to reduce the administrative overhead.
Some would argue that all makes sense. What also would make sense is get some more revenue in. No chance whatsoever of new taxes down the pike.
No, I think right now we've promised things in the past of these tax cuts that we've already implemented. And we've promised businesses that we will help them with that. And so they have their own business plan. It's already set. So if you change their plan, many who may be even thinking of coming here, they're not going to come here. Other side is now you've just destroyed their plan for the future on how they're going to promote their business or the hiring that they're going to do in the future. You can't do that to a business, and you can't, as my word is, you can't take your word and take it back. I think we have to get through this. And in fact, we are starting to see the economy grow, and I believe it's because we are helping in that nature.
I was going to ask, it seems as though, some would say that it's not growing enough and it's not growing as fast as some neighboring states. Have we not had that kind of consistency? Has the tax policy been so bad in recent years that that's the reason why we are not an economic dynamo right now?
Well, I think what we put forth here is we're starting to see it blossom. So we're following that trail, and that's the point I'm talking about earlier, that we don't want to go back on that. We don't want to retroactively take that away. We want to see this fully blossom and see how we incrementally come back. I think we will, and you're seeing that right now. I think absolutely we need to continue down the road we are.
So, please.
Well, just a comment on that. One of the things that people are talking about is to postpone the tax reformation package that we put in. Now, the one thing to remember is that we passed that a couple of years ago, but we pushed out the implementation date to January 1st of 2015. We did that because my own opinion at the time was, if you really believe this is going to help, we should be doing it right then, and I believe we should have. I think the reason that we haven't experienced the dynamic growth that I think we are about to start experiencing is because we did postpone the implementation of these tax reductions and these new tax reform that we did. If we would have done those 2 years ago, most of these packages take about 18 months to 24 months before you actually start seeing the stimulus kick in, according to the studies I've looked at. I think we would already be there. The fact that we are continue to at least continue static or slightly upward growth is indication of the underlying strength, I think, of the economy as we've retooled our economy and moved from a solely construction-based economy to a more diverse economy.
But a similar question to what I asked the speaker. Has the corporate tax rate, has the business tax climate been so bad that our economy has just been stifled by it and needs some $226 million some odd over the next 3 years of these tax cuts? Has it been so bad that we need this? Because some would argue that our corporate tax climate now is even better than the national average.
Well, when you're looking at an entire, see, our economy is nested in the national economy. You're finally starting to see the national economy pick up a little bit. Historically, Arizona's lagged. We've been a leader when it goes to the downturn. We've been lagging when it comes out in the business cycle. We have a chance now to go forward. Now, to your question about business climate, we don't want to just be the average business climate, because as businesses choose to flee California, we want to be in the mix. We don't want to be just average. We want to be right near the top for total business climate. And these tax packages that we've put into place, the regulatory reforms we put into place, they actually boost us up into the top 5 in some reports, top 10 in others. I believe that is a great indicia of the economy is going to turn in Arizona. It's going to start turning.
For those who argue that we have seen tax cuts over the years, that Republicans have been in control of the legislature and have been in the governor's office for quite a while now, and we have not seen this turnaround that has been discussed. For those who argue that, and they do argue that, how do you respond? Where has that turnaround been?
Well,
why have we not? And again, I understand that it's coming. It's
That's
coming
the
down the
point,
pike.
Yeah.
But why hasn't? We've had tax cuts. We've had pro-business climates. Some are saying we're not seeing the results.
Of course they're saying that right now, but as I stated, we still need to see the blossom happen. So it's what we've been stating here all along. We've just got these forward. They're just starting to come out and expand. And once they do, as I keep stating, blossom in the effect of what they do, I believe we're going to grow out of this. We're already seeing it. We started out at a 2% growth this year, which is a growth. But by December, we actually got into a 5% growth, which is right around the level we were believing we were going to be, I would say at, but that's the wrong word to use, but we were going to contend with. And so we actually, I think the lower gas prices, as we stated before, have helped that. I think the lowering of the gas prices are going to continue to help the economy, not only in this great state, but this great nation. And you're going to see commerce flowing. And I believe that's going to come out and help us just as well.
As far as what gets cut and how much it gets cut, what can you tell folks right now? What are you seeing out there? Because it's not going to be pretty.
You know, I think that we're looking at that. I think we're trying to see what's going to happen, and I think we're waiting a little bit for the governor's leadership on that, because the governor, I think he's going in the right direction. I think he's talking about trying to close the structural deficit over a couple, 2-3 year period. That's important. In order to get there, we're going to have to tighten our belt. Where? I'm curious to see what the governor's proposal is. As you know, I've always been a spending hawk. I'm the guy who introduced a bill to eliminate Arizona's participation in Medicaid programs. So I'm looking forward to see where those reductions might be, and my guess is you're going to see a lot of reallocation as well, redirection to appropriate places to continue to strengthen education in other areas that he's identified as vital. Let's wait and see.
We will wait and see as far as the governor's concerned. What would you like to see?
Well, again, I do believe in what he's been stating out there, and we definitely need, as President Biggs is talking about, tightening the belt, and we need our members to look into that, delve into that. That's why we have bodies. We're not on the governor's side where it's him, so he gets to formulate that opinion on one-on-one. I have a body of 60. He has a body of 30. We still have to herd cats, as we would say, go out there and discuss this with our members. Ultimately, they come from every walk of life in this great state, and they come forth with their ideas, and we have to listen to those. Once we do that, we can formulate a budget, put it together, and work it with the governor. He's going to have a piece out that's on Friday that President Biggs and I have looked at, not the budget itself, but overall view. And once we entail what we get to see there, I believe we're going to be standing right behind him. And I think both houses, as the memberships are, by the vast part, will as well.
On to education, the governor calling for an executive order to maximize dollars to the classroom. What do you think about this? And especially the argument that, again, Arizona overspends on administrative costs. We've had folks on this program saying we don't even spend the national average when it comes to administrative costs. How much is there to cut when you're scrubbing every dollar, as the governor wants us, and I'm sure you want as well? How much does it cost to scrub every dollar?
Well, when you need every dollar, you scrub it as much as you possibly can. But when people say, hey, look, you know, it's an interesting argument to make. Hey, we already spend below the national average on education administration. And yet the same people make similar arguments basing us on a comparative basis to other states on our overall education spending, or even our overall tax package for business or whatever. But for me, when I look at it, I think that there's some interesting dynamics when we say let's put the money into the classroom. I agree. That's where we want it to go. If you talk to people in our constituents, they're going to say we want it to go to the classroom because we want the best opportunities, best achievement, we want the best teachers, and we want to reward good teachers, etc. But our definitions that we have probably need to be scrubbed, to use your term, just as much. So why would a teacher's aide not be considered in-class dollars? Because that's where they go. That's everything is directed for that teacher's aide salary, and if they have benefits, and most don't, but if they do, that's going into the classroom. So I think we need to look at the definitions to help us understand exactly where that funding's going. And the other aspect too is we have districts. If you look at their Auditor General report, you'll see in some districts with they're upside down on administrative expenses over educational expenses. We need to find out why that is and maybe work on that.
Real quickly, I know some folks will say that some folks criticize administrative costs, they're including things like transportation and they're including things like maintenance, and that's not really the idea of administrative costs. Are you including transportation and maintenance in those top-heavy districts?
Well, some of them are, Ted. I've actually looked at it, and I thought that would exactly be what the issue would be, that we'd see that that's all transportation, because it looked to be, some of them are rural districts, some are urban, but I thought, well, you're going to see transportation, you're going to see a food service type of costs. Those should be high. Surprisingly, in a few of those districts, that isn't the case. And so that's why I get back to, let's define, I've heard for years what's in class or out of class, or administrative. We need to do better at defining what those are, and then we can see where that money is being allocated, and then we can go forward. Part of your problem is when you have 220 some odd districts, and you talk broadly, it's, some districts are going to say, but wait a second, we have hardly any administrative overhead, and others are going to bust the roof with administrative overhead.
The governor also called for public school achievement districts. What are your thoughts on that? The idea of reducing borrowing costs for charters and taking some buildings that may not be used and allow charters to expand in parts of towns that I don't know if charters are all that interested in. Anyway, as far as this idea is concerned, what do you think?
I tell you, Ted, I actually believe in a parental school choice, period. So you want to look at charters are fine, and so are the traditional public schools, and I know they have a tendency to rack each other's head a little bit. And it's funny because they're both public schools. So I wholeheartedly agree in the piece where the governor talks about parental school choice. And it just doesn't mean only the two public school systems. It also means if parents want to go to their private school, if parents want to homeschool, they ought to have these choices to best educate their child. And I think we need to be able to allow our parents to take their child at any point, any part of the city they want, down here, or part of the region they need to where they live, to best educate their child.
Should state funds be involved in those decisions?
Well, state funds, it just depends on what the decisions are, obviously. We have the court has ruled in certain cases you can't use them in some of those, but you always want to give the best advantage, because that's what we're about, isn't it? We all believe in education. And if we all believe in education for children, anybody, then shouldn't it be the best? And if we're talking about children, shouldn't it be for the parents? And that's our belief here. And any way we can do that, we need to look at those issues.
There are some charts that show that per student inflation-adjusted spending, Arizona, only I think Alabama and Oklahoma are doing worse in terms of pre-recession inflation-adjusted per student spending than Arizona. How do you, first of all, do you buy that? Secondly, how do you convince folks that we all care about education when those funds, and I know you don't want to talk about the lawsuit because things are happening here, but the lawsuit even suggests that there's a fight against those funds. How do you convince folks that education is important in Arizona?
Well, I don't really buy that, Ted. Let me give you, for instance, a teacher in Arizona is going to say, gosh, why aren't we making as much as a teacher in California? Well, because the cost of living in California is 3 times as much as it is in Arizona. You can live in an apartment in downtown LA, or you can live in a 2,500 square foot home in Gilbert for the same monthly payment. When you factor in cost of living, Arizona is actually about in the middle of the pack for salaries, for instance, for teachers and what have you. But the other aspect that most people, I want to make 2 points on that, is that the most people focus on, or don't focus on, is that we spend $1 out of every $2 in this state from our general fund that the legislature has control over on K-12 education. That's a commitment to education. When you consider that we're limited and we have to fund Department of Corrections, we're funding health and other social services. So that's a real strong commitment. The other aspect to it is the narrative is always creating an excuse which implies that there's something fundamentally wrong with Arizona's education attainment for our children. And I just don't believe that's the case. I believe that we're not perfect, but there's a lot of good, strong schools in the state, good, strong districts in the state. We see a lot of positive outcomes. And that's where I think we need to be focused. 2 things about focusing. You focus on what you do well, and then where you need to make corrections, you make corrections.
But indeed, what they're talking about with these numbers, and only Oklahoma and Alabama worse than us, we're talking about cuts to education relative to preceding the recession. And again, it's not necessarily that teachers aren't making as much as California, but that state by state, cuts per student, inflation adjusted, we're not doing all that well.
I figured you'd have brought up Mississippi because everybody brings Mississippi up.
If Mississippi were there, I'd bring them up. I didn't look them up, but they weren't worse than Arizona. So, which is saying something in and of itself.
Well, I mean, the problem is whenever we travel somewhere, it seems that every state always is second to last or third to last. Every time you go, you see the newspaper, it states that. I contend in another situation, and I absolutely agree with the president here. How much is enough in some points, you say? Well, for K through the U, half our budget that we have purview over is education. We agree in that. We're not taking things away, and we're not coming here saying, oh, we're elected now, this is the greatest thing, let's start slicing and dicing. We're hired to manage the state, come up here by our constituents within our different regions, as we say, to manage for the state the budget. So we do our best, and I think that shows within that realm of 50% of the budget where it's going. I will tell you this, less than 13% of this state is private property. You look east of the Rockies, it's less than 2% the federal government controls. You include the reservations here, it's roughly 70% that the federal government controls of our land in our state. Those are tax dollars lost. Instead of just taxing the people who are here at the moment more, if we can get those lands back, we could actually expand out and have more property, and we can levy those taxes out and just get it by volume instead of higher taxes.
Is that a realistic idea, getting those lands back?
Well, let's say, just real quick, we spend $10.1 billion in education this year, the most in state history. And then I agree with Representative Gowan that I think the way schools are funded anywhere in this country, you can fiddle with the statistics and data any way you want to. But the issue that you have when you try to take back the lands that the feds control is we have to, in order to do that, we have to open up our Enabling Act, which is a co-enabling act with New Mexico. So you have to open up both of enabling acts, which requires congressional action. That's really hard to do. Mm-hmm. Is it worth doing? Absolutely it's worth doing, because until we gain and get a hold of our lands and bring them in, we can bring them back to the state, we can convert it to private property. You hinder our economy enormously. We're at a gross disadvantage. And let's take a look at Texas, for instance. Texas has virtually no federal land issue that they have to deal with. Oklahoma has virtually no federal land issue that they have to deal with. Most of the states, as the the Speaker Gowan said, that are east of the Mississippi don't deal with the same issue that we deal with. Most western states are actually trying to get hold of that land for the purpose of improving their economy, and that's a fair and appropriate goal.
All right, we are out of time. It's good to have you both here. Thank you so
you,
much
sir.
for
Good to be
joining
here,
us. Look
Ted.
forward to seeing
As
you next
always.
month. All right. Thursday on Arizona Horizon, we will update efforts to settle that court case involving inflation funding for state schools. And gas prices are low. We'll see if they're going to stay that way and for how long. That's Thursday evening, 5:30 and 10 right here on Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.